The time is 12 minutes past 7 o'clock. Now, disruption to several worldwide websites continues today, despite Amazon saying it's fixed the underlying problems that caused an outage affecting thousands of businesses. Snapchat, Duolingo and Roblox were among those affected, and games developers said it's still difficult for them to work. The underlying problem was a malfunction at Amazon Web Services, which had something called a DNS resolution that stopped working. If it all sounds like gobbledygook, you never fear. Kevin Curran is going to explain all. He lectures in cybersecurity at Ulster University. Morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Sarah.
So first of all, what is a DNS resolution?
DNS resolution stands for the name service. The easiest way to explain it is like a phone book for the internet, because the internet functions on numbers. But of course, us humans, we remember websites, the names like Microsoft.com, Google.com. So when we type in Google.com, the computer turns that into an IP address, a unique IP address like a phone number, which has already been given to the website, and then it routes our traffic. But in the US East 1 region in Philadelphia, Amazon's service again, somewhere along the way that they were updating a database, which is crucial for maintaining connections and services. And basically the DNS resolver failed, so that the database could not be found, and then that led to request after request. And of course, they kind of did themselves their own denial of service, of course, bringing down all the services that we've seen, again, that have been affected, because Amazon controls 30% of the cloud service market. Again, half their operating revenue profit comes from the Amazon Web Services.
Yeah, well, basically they rent
so
cloud
many
computing.
systems.
They rent cloud computing to companies, don't they? But I think that it was maybe a bit of a shock for some of us that they have 30% of that market, which is not a monopoly, but it's certainly a very, very significant amount. Does it raise questions, Kevin, then about just how much one big tech company, and you know, we always talk about the big three, don't we? Microsoft, Google and Amazon, but just how much reliance there is on those three?
It does. In other words, we're seeing what could be seen as a centralized system, where we think the internet is distributed the way that it was invented to be, to cope with any failures in certain regions. But the problem here is that a lot of these customers would have had their system services running in the cloud in US East 1, but they didn't have multi-region cloud systems again, which the cloud is actually developed for, to be able to scale and to move and to relocate in real time again. So anyone who only had their services and hadn't paid for a service in another region, which of course would have been exempt from this failure, then their systems went down. Anyone who didn't have their services again running in parallel in different regions again, which is what we call redundancy, which is best practice. Again, that they've seen a failure, as we've seen everything from Ring doorbells and even people who had air-controlled mattresses again failing. So again, a lot of systems require, even trivial systems like that require a web service nowadays.
Air-controlled mattresses require a web service.
I know. I mean, that's just some people haven't thought about the way that they develop their apps again. But yeah, there was a guy complaining that he had to go to bed in a hot bed last night, go to sleep.
So look, they're saying that it is resolved, etc. But is it?
It is for now. But again, you know, maybe when does the next failure come again? But these systems are extremely complex again. So it only takes one configuration to bring down. So again, people will be asking again, people who run services, run apps, whatever else, that they'll have to go in and look to be able to see, okay, where is there single points of failure? Do we have enough redundancy? Have we bought cloud provision? But of course, in different regions, for instance, but of course that costs money. You know, everything else to be able to, you know, because when things are working well, you know, when everyone's got a finite budget, you know, for instance, we're all diligent. I'm sure you're diligent and, you know, at your work. But I guess if I asked you, do you have a second router for your internet service provider at home? What happens if your router fails? Of course, you don't have a second router, because that'll cost 100 or 200 quid. But literally, if your router for your internet service provider fails, you're offline until they replace it. But again, so there's a
I
cost
guess,
in all
though, if
these
your
things.
business 100% relies on it, though, you probably would have a second router. And some people are saying that's one of the questions that needs to be asked, not about Amazon's web services, but about these apps, is that they didn't have a backup system. They never had well, what happens if Amazon goes down? What do we do then? Do they share some of the blame here?
Yeah, because there are services, again, which would have failed over to a region I was working. Because generally, when you type in, not if you have a friend you're on the phone with right now and they're in America and you say, let us go to google.com. So, of course, you both type in google.com and the page appears on your screen. Now, both of you, I will be served one from a region, either in Belfast or London. Again, my google.com will come from a region near me, and the person in America, that their google.com will be served up from a computer in America. Now, that makes sense because less hops, of course, and that's the beauty of the cloud, the beauty of Acme and other things like Cloudflare again, that they route our traffic because DNS can do that. In other words, we're getting the closest local server to us from the companies again. So companies again will have to definitely check that their apps, that they paid for multi-regency again, that they're either using multi-cloud, for instance, again, that they can do chaos engineering. You can prepare for these things again without obviously bringing the internet down, but we have software which allows you to be able to literally plug out things as if they were physical servers and see what fails. But again, that means that there's money involved in that. There's engineers you have to pay. And again, engineers don't come. Cloud engineers. I have a company I was involved with. I mean, the salary for the cloud engineer we paid was 170,000. And, cloud engineers are some of the highest paid salaries because, and these are the guys who configure your system, work out the switches, the routers, the multi-regency, just like we're talking about.
Sure.
And these people, these people are very expensive to hire.
OK, Kevin, we're going to have to leave it there. Really interesting. Thank you. Kevin Curran, Professor Kevin Curran, working in cybersecurity at Ulster University.
It is just coming up to 7:20. The headlines this morning, a report by the